You chose not to put any new growth measures in this budget.
Well, that's exactly.
Can I just
no, that's not what I said. Dame Harriet. Sorry, Dame Harriet.
Perhaps, Dame Harriet, if you ask a question, then the Chancellor can.
Are you still
don't
chairing the
contradict what I
Growth
just
Mission
said.
Board?
This is the moment Rachel Reeves is asked a simple question about growth and everything starts to unravel. Harriet Baldwin doesn't raise her voice, doesn't interrupt and doesn't grandstand. She just asks the questions and lets the answers do the damage. What you're about to watch is the full exchange and it gets uncomfortable fast.
Chancellor, in the run-up to the general election, you said that you had no plans for tax rises beyond what was in your manifesto and that you would focus on growth and that growth was really the way in which you were going to get more tax revenues coming in. You've now put together two of the biggest tax-raising budgets in UK history. And the Office for Budget Responsibility has told us that there's not a single measure overall that has a positive growth impact. They think, in fact, that tax hikes are harming growth. So can you tell us what your growth plan is? It's not one of the priorities of this budget. Are you still chairing the Growth Mission Board?
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. First of all, and we've been through this a number of times. There was new information after the general election. First of all, the £22 billion black hole in the public finances left by the previous government,
which has been discredited by the Office for Budget Responsibility.
Not at all. The £22 billion black hole left by the previous government, which was set out to me by Treasury officials the weekend that I became Chancellor of the Exchequer, which we had to fill, and then the £16 billion downgrade to productivity, the impact that had on fiscal revenues. And as the Office of Budget Responsibility were very clear, that reflects the weak productivity in the previous Parliament. The OBR made the decision to do that revision this summer, but they were very clear it doesn't reflect any policies of this government. So those are the two key things that have changed since the general election. And of course, I did go into the general election with the targeted tax increases on non-DOMs, on private equity, on private schools, on the energy profits levy that we were elected to deliver. We have delivered those. We have had to do additional tax raising because of the mess left by the previous government. But you've also asked about growth. Well, shall I finish answering your question, Dame Harriet?
Yeah.
You've asked about economic growth. You will know that in the spring, the OBR upgraded their growth forecasts. It was the biggest upgrade to growth from a non-fiscal measure that the OBR in their 15-year history now has ever made, and that reflected the changes that we made to planning. And they also upgraded the growth forecast because of the capital investment that this government is prioritising. Of course, under the previous government's plans, capital investment was due to fall in this Parliament. I protected capital investment and have continued to do so, even in this challenging budget with the productivity downgrade. So the OBR have been very clear that both the planning reforms, voted against, I believe, by the Conservative Party, and also the capital expenditure, which the Conservatives were going to cut, has resulted in an upgrade of productivity. And indeed, if you look at, during budget week, made further progress on a third runway at Heathrow. We signed off the film studio in Marlow that had been opposed by Buckinghamshire Council and that we called in. And since the budget, JP Morgan have announced a huge investment in Canary Wharf. Goldman Sachs have announced that they're doubling their headcount of jobs in Birmingham, and in addition, the Co-op have announced that they are freezing or cutting 2,700 prices in store. These are all pro-growth measures, but probably the most pro-growth of all is the 5 interest rate cuts that we've had from the Bank of England since the general election. That's only possible because of the stability that we've provided after the chaos we had in previous years.
So you chose not to put any new growth measures in this budget.
Well, that's exactly. No, that's not what I said. Dame Harriet.
Sorry,
Dame Harriet.
Perhaps, Dame Harriet, if you ask a question, then the Chancellor can.
Are you still
don't
chairing the
contradict what I
Growth
just
Mission
said.
Board?
Yes, we have regular meetings of the Growth Mission Board, but I did not say in the answer to my question, as you suggested, that there were no growth measures in this budget. Far from it. In the week of the budget, we made further progress on the runway at Heathrow. We signed off the film studio in Marlow. Jamie Dimon, the chief executive of JP Morgan, who could invest in any country in the world, chose the day after the budget, referencing the actions that I had taken in the budget, that as a result of that, he would be making the investment in Canary Wharf. Similarly, Goldman Sachs, a company that could invest in any country in the world, announced the following day, because of the measures in my budget, that he was investing in Britain.
Okay, thank you. Dame Harry, questions.
Do you accept, Chancellor, that your revealed preference now in terms of the two budgets you've brought in is that you hike taxes a lot, and that the speculation and the impact of the speculation in the run-up to this budget had a real-world impact in terms of people's decisions, in terms of mortgages, in terms of people making decisions on their pensions, in terms of a range of different things that changed behaviour within businesses? A lot of businesses said they put decisions on hold, and that this impression that you're ready to go for tax rises is going to hang over this country's economy for the rest of this Parliament.
Of course, the previous government took taxes to a record high and saw interest rates go through the roof. And since the general, I'm not surprised you don't want to hear about the previous government, nor the voters.
Budget measures. Can I just have
there we are. There's a rare moment of agreement. No one wants to hear about the previous government.
Questions and answers would be good, please.
Yes, which is what I'm trying to do, Dame Meg. We have returned stability to the economy, which has enabled the Bank of England to cut interest rates 5 times, and as you would have seen since the budget, a number of mortgage lenders have cut interest rates on mortgages. I think interest rates now on mortgages are lower than they were since the Prime Minister, maybe one who you might not want to remember as well, Liz Truss, took interest rates through the roof. I very much welcome that. Again, those reductions in interest rates would not have been possible without the stability that I've returned to the economy.
We're going to get into measures in a moment, Dame Meg, but last year I asked you, Chancellor, about the way in which you're implementing all the Article 4 recommendations from the IMF, in terms of you're basically going through the whole list of recommendations and ticking them off one by one. Last year I asked you if you were planning any overhaul of council tax. You said, no, we're not looking at that. I asked you if you were looking at road pricing. You said, no, we're not looking at road pricing. I would argue that you've started the process on both of those in this budget. There are a couple more measures that I think the public out there would be very interested in hearing if you can rule those out. Capital gains on primary residences. Are you planning to do that in this Parliament? And are you planning to change the state pension to a single lock in this Parliament? Can you rule those out, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chancellor.
Chancellor, in your budget, you say that the High Street will benefit from permanently lower business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure. And I think you will have heard that the reality for a lot of these High Street businesses is, in fact, that they're looking at the detail and they feel that they will struggle to survive with the higher rates bills that are coming, on top of the rising employment costs, on top of their rising energy bills. To give a few examples, and we'll all have heard them in our constituency post bags, pubs are facing a 15% rise. There's music venues in Newcastle, 431% rise. The British Beer and Pub Association says community pubs up 63%. So would you accept, Chancellor, that a lot of these businesses feel misled by that statement?
So let me set out what is happening with business rates, because there's a couple of things happening at the same time. The last time that the Valuation Office looked at the rateable values of property was in 2021, and of course that was in the middle of the pandemic, and so many rateable values fell sharply during the pandemic. They've now been revalued, and of course those rateable values are now higher because we are no longer during a lockdown in a pandemic. At the same time, during the pandemic, there was temporary support given to a number of businesses to support them with business rates. The previous government put in temporary support that finished in the last year of that government. They didn't allocate any money for future. In my first budget, I put in additional support for the first year, and in this budget we've put another £4.3 billion of additional support in as we transition to more normal valuations and rates. But what we've also done in this budget is to permanently lower the business rates, the tax rates that are applied to properties for eligible retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, and that is paid for by a higher rate on the top 1% of properties, particularly distribution centres that are used by online companies. So there will be permanently lower rates for those sectors. But as we transition, we've put in £4.3 billion of support for the types of businesses that you refer to. And so I think the average pub will be getting a 4% increase in rates this year, and the rates are capped at 15% or £800 for smaller venues this year, and that support continues at a phased down rate for the next couple of years. But we're moving to a system where we have permanently lower rates on those venues.
Can I just urge you to look at this again, Chancellor, because UK Hospitality would dispute that. They think a 15% hike on average for pubs. So I'll just leave.
Rachel Reeves, Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, walks into the Treasury Select Committee with the confidence of someone who's rehearsed every line, anticipated every question, and expects to navigate the proceedings as smoothly as a swan gliding across a mirror-like lake. Her briefcase gleams with ministerial authority, her budget speech polished to perfection. She's ready, or so she thinks. Then enters Harriet Baldwin. Now, Baldwin isn't your typical political brawler. She doesn't arrive wielding a flamethrower or hurling theatrical accusations across the chamber. No, her approach is far more devastating. Think of her as the parliamentary equivalent of a velvet glove concealing brass knuckles, elegant on the surface, but capable of delivering knockout blows with surgical precision. What unfolds over the next hour isn't just political theatre. It's a masterclass in how to dismantle a government's economic narrative using nothing more than facts, receipts, and impeccably timed questions. Baldwin wastes no time with pleasantries or gentle warm-ups. Her first question lands like a fiscal uppercut directly to the Chancellor's credibility. You explicitly stated you wouldn't raise taxes beyond your manifesto commitments. So why have you now delivered two of the biggest tax-raising budgets in British history? Boom. No preamble, no soft introduction, just a direct challenge to the fundamental promise that underpinned Labour's election campaign. It's the kind of question that immediately strips away political veneer and demands accountability. Reeves' response? Let's just say it had all the grace of someone caught photocopying their own face in the Treasury basement at 3 a.m. She begins fumbling, her carefully prepared confidence visibly evaporating. Well, you see, she stammers, there was a black hole. A £22 billion black hole, to be precise. Ah yes, the infamous black hole, a fiscal anomaly so conveniently massive that it apparently devoured every pre-election promise within a 10-mile radius. This black hole has become the government's get-out-of-jail-free card, their universal excuse for policy reversals that would make a contortionist wince. But Harriet Baldwin isn't buying it. With the speed of a seasoned prosecutor, she fires back, discredited by the Office for Budget Responsibility. You could practically hear teacups rattling in committee rooms across Westminster. The OBR, Britain's independent fiscal watchdog, had essentially called the government's bluff, and Baldwin wasn't about to let that inconvenient truth slide into obscurity. Sensing her narrative crumbling, Reeves launches into what can only be described as an economic filibuster. She waxes lyrical about productivity downgrades, capital investment strategies, JP Morgan's commitment to Canary Wharf, and even attempts to summon credibility by name-dropping Goldman Sachs like she's reciting her LinkedIn endorsements during a particularly desperate job interview. It's a verbal smokescreen of impressive proportions, as if economic confidence could be conjured through sheer verbosity, like an incantation that might transform budgetary chaos into fiscal stability if only enough buzzwords are uttered with sufficient conviction. Harriet Baldwin remains spectacularly unimpressed. She sits there with the demeanor of a dinner guest being served cold soup alongside a heaping portion of excuses, her expression suggesting she's heard it all before and found it wanting. Then Baldwin circles back, because of course she does. with the patience of a shark that knows its prey has nowhere to go. Her question cuts through the rhetorical fog. If all this magical growth is supposedly happening, why are there no actual growth measures in the budget itself? It's a devastating observation that exposes the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the government's economic narrative. Reeves, undeterred by reality, insists that the budget is absolutely brimming with growth initiatives. She lists them with the enthusiasm of a parent bragging about their child's achievements. "We've approved progress on Heathrow's third runway," she announces, as if laying tarmac now counts directly as GDP growth. "We've greenlit a film studio in Marlow," she beams, in a tone suggesting she personally approved the next blockbuster franchise. "Goldman Sachs has chosen Britain," she declares triumphantly, like a proud parent whose child got picked first for the dodgeball team. To which Baldwin responds with a silent, knowing nod of a woman internally sighing. "Yes, dear, that's all very nice, but where's the actual growth in the actual economy affecting actual people?" The interrogation intensifies as Baldwin moves on to the tax rises themselves, the kind that give small business owners night terrors and make mortgage holders check their finances with the anxiety of someone defusing a bomb. Baldwin points out something the Treasury clearly hoped everyone would overlook. The mere expectation and speculation about these tax hikes had already caused economic chaos, with businesses postponing investment decisions and homeowners eyeing their mortgages with existential dread. Her question lands with devastating clarity. Isn't the anticipation of your tax policies alone enough to spook the economy for the remainder of this parliament? Reeves, now performing political yoga of Olympic caliber, twists herself into a remarkable defensive position. Well, technically, the previous Conservative government had even higher taxes and worse interest rates, so you're welcome. It's quite the spin, essentially arguing, we're not great, but at least we're not apocalyptic. Not exactly the rallying cry that inspires economic confidence. Still not satisfied, and bless her dogged persistence, Baldwin produces her trump card. The IMF Article 4 checklist, which Reeves apparently treats like a DIY manual for controversial policy implementation. Council tax overhaul? Road pricing? Capital gains on primary residences? Single-lock pensions? Baldwin ticks through the list like a teacher checking homework. Are we implementing all of these, or just the ones that generate tabloid headlines? Reeves, perhaps sensing the trapdoor beneath her feet beginning to creak, simply replies, "Yes. Just yes." No elaboration. No context. No defense. It's a moment so economically brief it could have been scripted by a minimalist playwright with a word limit. The silence that follows speaks volumes. But the pièce de résistance arrives when Baldwin unveils her final devastating blow, the budget's supposed love letter to the high street. "You claim that pubs, music venues, and shops will benefit from permanently lower business rates," Baldwin observes, her tone carrying the weight of someone who's actually read the fine print rather than just the press release. "Except," she continues, pausing for effect, "pubs are facing a 15% hike. Newcastle's music venues are looking at 400% increases. The British Beer and Pub Association is practically throwing pint glasses at the wall in frustration." Reeves launches into yet another dissertation, something convoluted about rateable values last being assessed during the pandemic, temporary support measures sunsetting, online distribution centers finally paying their fair share, an economic opera performed in 3 increasingly desperate acts. But Baldwin isn't done. "UK hospitality disputes your claims," she states plainly, her words sharper than a shredded tax return fluttering to the committee room floor. Reeves tries to clarify. 15% is the cap, not the average. As though that technicality might somehow calm the nation's pub landlords currently calculating whether they can afford to keep their lights on. Baldwin fires back immediately, so the average pub will effectively hit that cap then. Reeves attempts damage control. No, the average increase is 4%. The cap is 15%. But by this point, the damage is irreversible. You can practically hear publicans across Britain yelling at their televisions, "Pull the other one, Rachel. It's got an excise tax attached." What makes this entire exchange so magnificently, quintessentially British is that throughout this systematic dismantling of government policy, not a single voice was raised. There was no desk thumping, no dramatic walkouts, no papers flung across the room in frustration. Just one MP asking cool, calculated questions with the precision of a master watchmaker disassembling a grandfather clock, while a chancellor frantically tries to glue the springs back together using statistics, corporate name drops, and budgetary sleight of hand. It was less a policy explanation and more a parliamentary escape room challenge, with Reeves desperately searching for the key that might unlock a coherent narrative while Baldwin calmly reminded her that the door was never actually locked. She just needed to tell the truth throughout the ordeal. Reeves clung to certain words like talismans against reality. Stability featured prominently, repeated with the fervor of a monk chanting mantras in a thunderstorm. "We've brought stability to Britain's economy," she proclaimed, apparently oblivious to the irony of making such claims while the room gently shook from the tectonic weight of Baldwin's follow-up questions. It's a curious political reflex. This belief that if you say growth or stability enough times, perhaps it manifests like an economic Beetlejuice, summoned into existence through repetition alone. By the session's end, it felt less like budget scrutiny and more like Reeves had just run a marathon while simultaneously being asked to solve complex mathematical equations and dodge falling political pianos. She clung to her talking points like a lifeboat in a storm, while Baldwin casually torpedoed them with receipts, real-world examples, and that most devastating of political weapons, the calm, incredulous eyebrow raise. What we witnessed was essentially a polite, spreadsheet-based takedown of one of the most important figures in British economic policy. No shouting, no name-calling, no theatrical grandstanding. Just the devastating power of well-researched questions, perfectly timed and supported by facts that cut sharper than any Friday newspaper headline. This is fiscal theatre at its absolute finest, where the real fireworks don't happen on the Commons floor during Prime Minister's questions, but in committee rooms when someone like Harriet Baldwin shows up armed with questions and receipts, ready to hold power to account with nothing more than facts and persistence. So the next time you hear a chancellor claim their budget is pro-growth, ask yourself, are we growing in reality, or just growing the Treasury's vocabulary of convenient excuses? Is the high street genuinely thriving, or merely surviving under caps and caveats with frozen ministerial smiles? And most importantly, where would British democracy be without MPs like Harriet Baldwin, calmly cutting through the political noise one devastating question at a time?